in 1996. Mr. Nagrath went back to college to complete his post-graduation from IMI, Switzerland. In Switzerland, he worked as a grill master chef at Planet Hollywood, Zurich. In a career spanning more than 24 years, he has opened more than 52 restaurants. This is not including QSR formats, so it's only CDR and FDRs, and 9 hotels. He has also authored a book, Banqueting and Catering Management, The Basic Concept. He has been conferred with many awards and recognitions during his tenure, including Bharat Jyoti Award for Outstanding Services. Mr. Nagrath brings with him an entrepreneurial foresight combined with an extensive hands-on operational and corporate experience underlined with a strong conceptual and project development capability. He specializes in concept development, ideation, and operation with a keen sense of project development and identifying new opportunities. On a final note, he's also a fascinating individual, and we are grateful for his presence amongst us today. Without further delay, please join me in welcoming Mr. Kushagra Nagrath. Today, he'll be talking about restaurant entrepreneurship. What will it take, and how do you know if you got it? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you, Dr. Singh. All right, guys. Basically, I'm not going to lecture you or give you too much, theory. I'm sure your college does that for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through my journey of the last 24 years. And then we will have a little bit of an interactive session. Please feel free to ask questions at that particular point in time. So, my journey began about 24 years ago, formally, which is going to college, getting an education. But before that, over the years, while, as a child, I started developing a little fascination towards the way the food and all was done, a little bit of history. Why do we eat something, from different places and all? So what I would like to say is that the most important thing is what you need to develop somewhere, which we lose over a period of time, is the sense of inquiry. We should be very curious. Be curious to know origins of things, where they come from, what it takes, why is it being done in a particular manner. What this will do is it will unwittingly give you a lot of depth and knowledge into why things happen or how things happen. So coming back to college, I did specialize in F&B services, and then was a management trainee with Taj. And while working with Taj as a management trainee, we go through various departments. Once you join as a management trainee, you're exposed to a lot of things. But your core, whatever specialty that you do, be it kitchen or housekeeping or front office or service, is where they kind of put you towards the end so that you can specialize in what you've chosen. So once I was given the area that I wanted to, which is F&B service, the fascination only grew. At that particular point of time, freestanding restaurant business as such wasn't in its prime. There were, of course, restaurants all the time, but not to the extent that you would see, that has happened in the last 10 to 15 years. So what we were exposed to was a lot of fine dining in the hotels, and the elaborate service sequences, the most expensive stuff that money could buy in terms of cutlery, in terms of decor, all of that was there. So that only made me grow fonder and fonder of the idea that F&B is something that is not just purely a business, it is also a carnal need for human being. Ever since man was born, the most important thing, if you look at civilizations across, people were called nomads. Why? Because they would gather food. Then they started hunting, which meant that they would start moving towards water bodies or civilizations. All great civilizations, if you look at them, were found near water bodies, where they could do cultivation. Animals would come to drink, so they would, kill them for food. So the underlying principle is food is not going to go anywhere. It is our basic need. It is also our social need. It is also a business need. Despite whatever you hear about the coronavirus and everything, yes, there are challenges to it. There will always be challenges to it. But this business is not going anywhere. So that was just kind of just now to get into specifics and details. So what we learned was, how service and all is done, how all of that is done. That's basic. But during our entire tenure of our college, something else was also happening, which was our theory classes. Our professors, our teachers, they started building a very strong fundamentals into our psyche, which you don't appreciate, particularly when you are in college, but it goes a long way when you get out of college and you start understanding why, I'm thinking like that, or why am I doing like that. So when we look at the business, there are 3 or 4 very important things to look at. Location, of course, it is prime and given. Without a proper location, and what I'm talking about right now is a physical restaurant, is very critical, because it gives you visibility, it gives you a ready market, it gives you a lower marketing cost. Now, when we come to costs, what is very critical about understanding what it takes is there are 3 things. Your COGS, which is your cost of goods sold, which is your input cost, your labor cost, and your rental cost. These are often neglected, and people pay very little attention to this. Because if you look at it, a lot of people with a lot of money want to open a restaurant. Restaurants are, a style statement also. But people who take it seriously as a business need to understand that these 3 costs, which I mentioned, cost of goods sold, labor cost, and rentals are key, because they can make or break. Your labor and your rent is pretty much fixed. So despite the fact whether you do business or not, you have to have that hanging over your head. Apart from that, F&B, for all its glory, for all its glamour, people do not understand that the margins are lower. So typically the industry average is anywhere between 5 to 15%. That's a huge gap. So the volume that you generate will effectively play a very important role as to what your take home is. Are you clear on this so far? I hope I'm not losing anyone. Okay. So what you need to understand is the margins in this business are low. This is in particular to CDRs and FDRs. When you come down to QSRs, other businesses, the margins are slightly different. I'm going to touch upon that also briefly. So what and why do people get into CDRs and FDRs? The reason is simple. Some people get into it because they want to be restaurateurs, as in, the glamour side of it. Then there are serious people who want to take it as a business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through my journey of having restaurants, running restaurant companies, and owning restaurant companies. So my first venture started way back in 2003. I jumped straight from hotels to a small company that we formed called Mahima Hospitality. Our first venture was a little nightclub in Connaught Place called No Escape. There were 4 of us who started this place, and we were fairly young at that particular point of time. Maybe about 3-4 years older than you guys at that particular point in time. So we had all the energy, we were wild, and we got into that business, not knowing how it's going to pan out. But we wanted to party, we wanted to do a lot of, get-togethers, meet our friends and stuff like that. So we opened the club. But after opening the club, we realized that we made some really stupid mistakes. Why? Because we opened a place for ourselves and not keeping a particular target of, the target audience in mind, or the kind of people that we wanted to cater to. So rule number 1, open a place for business, understand who you're catering to. You're not catering to yourself, because you're not going to keep coming and drinking and eating in your place and paying the bills for it. You need much more, many more people. So we started something which was very different for us, that we would charge all our friends. Earlier, we were not. We made sure that it was a place of business. So never ever do business in charity. You can do charity later on. You can be a philanthropist later. You can have your corporate social responsibilities later, but do not make this cardinal mistake of ensuring that the place. Guys, can you hear me? Yeah, do not make this mistake.
Yes,
do not make this mistake that you open a place where you go and party and you entertain yourself. Never do that. Rule number 2, what we realized was we opened the place, and initially we were making a lot of money in terms of the top line was there, but the bottom line was dwindling. So we realized that we again made a mistake of not costing well, which is again a critical aspect. So what we did was we hired fancy managers, despite the fact that we were all there. We hired fancy managers, we hired fancy chefs, we allowed them to run the place, and we were running it more like lalas, as in, guys who would come, swing by, and not do it. So after 6 months, we changed the dynamics. Each one of us took over a certain aspect. One was handling the PR, one was handling the operations, one was handling the purchasing, and the fourth one was handling the marketing. So what we did was we got whatever we had learned now in theory to practical application, which meant we redid the entire food costs, the recipe costs ourselves. We started putting actual marketing budgets into place. We were managing, the entire outlet ourselves, which meant from gate management to actually mopping the floors. So this is rule number 3. Never ever think that any work is beneath you or that you can't do it, because you should be able to do pretty much everything. I'm not saying that you will make the best cocktails in the world or the best food in the world, but you should have the ability to work hard, work long. That is practically the most important thing that you need to cultivate. It's a habit. It comes with practice, and the more you practice, the better you become at it. So which means that we would stand at the gate, we would do the profiling, which meant that what started happening was we started getting in a much better clientele. Why? Because we would screen the people, and we would say, okay, this person is somebody who can come to our bar or come to our club and will fit in, will not create a scene, will not create any ruckus. And this led us to opening our second venture, which was Shalom, which I don't know if you guys are aware of it. It still exists in a form called S Lounge in GK2. So we shut No Escape because No Escape was a very childish thing. Though initially we lost money, we didn't lose money on it because we funded our second outlet from that place. And Shalom became something of a folklore in Delhi's nightclub. But when we opened the place, what we did was we opened it and it had a back entry, which meant it had an entry from the colony side, though it was in the market. So first 2 or 3 months, we would get a daily license, but people wouldn't come in. People wouldn't come in. So we were like, have we made a mistake? Why is nobody coming in? And it would have been the easiest thing for us to give up and say this place is not going to work and move out. But what we did was, the 4 of us, every evening we started going to people's houses in GK, which was in the walking distance area. We started knocking on doors. We invited people to come to the bar for a first round of drink on us. And within 3 weeks, the place was jam-packed, to the extent where, for about 8 years, we used to stand outside ourselves, allow people in, not allow them in, and we were very strict with our rules. We had a dress code. If you came in flip-flops or chappals and all, you weren't allowed inside. You had to have a reservation. We didn't take a reservation post 9 o'clock, but the place was banging. It was really, really good. So the learning that we got from this was don't give up. It's very easy to give up. There is always an alternate. You have to think, you have to trust your partners, and you have to have the ability to trust yourself, and then go and get it. So the most important thing was to not give up at that particular point of time and go for it. And it really changed fortunes for us. Then we set up something called Laid Back Waters, which was Delhi's first seafood lounge bar. And this opened in 2004. And this was situated at the Qutub Hotel. At that time, very few independent restaurants used to open in hotels. So we opened at the Qutub Hotel. Beautiful place, highly successful. Then we opened a chain of casual Italian trattorias called Italic. Now, the fundamental was that Italian food was being done either in hotels, or there were two places in Delhi. One was Tonino, the other one was Diva, which were fairly expensive. So we wanted to bring Italian food not in the specialty format, but more like a cafe format, which was affordable. So we brought that in. And what we realized, and this is another important thing for you guys to understand, is every place cannot cater to everybody. The biggest mistake we all try to make is we try to cater to everybody. You have to figure out what your niche is, what your market is. Because if you start catering to everybody, you will end up doing everything and reaching nowhere. Is that clear? The important thing is to understand. Sir. The important thing is, okay, fine. McDonald's, does it cater to everybody? You might think it does, but do you think it caters to everybody? Yes, no, maybe?
Mostly to the to the child and to the younger age people.
Younger age group, or people who are in a rush and don't mind paying an X amount of money for an X quality, right? When you think of having burgers, is McDonald's the first choice, or do you have something else in your mind?
McDonald's, for sure.
Because of the convenience or the price?
To be honest, both. Because it is convenient as well as it's really cheap, to be very honest.
Okay. No, fair enough. I mean, see, you need to understand that there is a market for that. And I'm going to come to that after this particular segment I finish. And I'll tell you why that happens. So get into a niche. It is very important. So if you're doing, if you're going to open an Italian joint, be very thoughtful of what kind of Italian. Because you can have a pizzeria and a pasta joint, or you can go down, a Valencia model or a Florence model or a Sicilian model. So you need to understand something which is very important is the kind of cuisine that you're going to do. Every cuisine has its fundamentals and diversity. So you want to specialize into a particular region because, see, I'll tell you something about how Oriental restaurants exploded into India. One of the first ones was the Golden Dragon in Mumbai at the Taj. And it used to serve Sichuan kind of food. Taj has a big hand in bringing Oriental food to mainstream dining across the country. However, there was another gentleman in Bombay called Henry Tham who opened something called China Garden, which was one of the first free independent restaurants in Bombay. When I say independent, I mean standalone, not associated to a hotel or a chain. And he was a second generation Indian Chinese. So he brought something which was very unique, and he is the one who's credited to introducing Gobi Manchurian. There is nothing known as, Manchurian or Gobi in Chinese. But he understood his market. He understood that Bombay has a very, very strong vegetarian market, which has the money, which is the Gujus and the Madus. And they like good dining, they like fine dining, They have the money, but they are very, very particular about the vegetarian food they eat, especially publicly. So he introduced chili paneer and he introduced gobi Manchurian. There's another place which is very similar to that called Shanwazari at Taj Bengal, which introduced bhindi into Chinese food, which is like a crispy okra, chili fried crispy okra, which they did. And again, 70% of their menu used to be vegetarian. Now, why did these guys do something, like this? There is a deep study that goes into it. And you need to understand where you are, who your major market is, who are you going after. Are you going after, let's say, college-going kids? Or are you, going through, children? Like Pizza Express, which is a prime example. A lot of people, go and eat there. But they particularly cater to a much bigger children audience with the way they do things, the small pizzas, the small cinnamon rolls, and the kind of parties that they do. So the critical aspect is understanding your market, understanding the kind of per head spending you want. This will determine, A, what route you go. Route meaning you're split between your vegetarian to non-vegetarian kind of thing, the pricing of your menu. A lot of times the cuisine also is determined by the kind of market you want to cater to. Let's say you want to open a fantastic Korean restaurant. You're not going to open it at Yamuna Park because you will not have the clientele or the people who've traveled to these places or understand that. Now, let's say if you open it in Vasant Vihar, you might still do reasonably well because it has a massive expat clientele. Gurgaon area, then you will figure out where the Koreans stay. So these are very, very critical aspects to understand. Where, what cuisine, who is my target market, what is the kind of spending that I'm looking at. This will also determine the scale, the kind of expenditure you do, in your place. For example, low-income places, if you want to set up, you will set up something more like a McDonald's. Why? Because it has the prominence, it is convenient, it is, I wouldn't say it's tasty food, but it's consistent food. The biggest point about McDonald's, it's average, but it is supremely consistent in its mediocrity. And you know that if I go in, this is what I'm going to get. This is the taste. This is the price. That's it. You get my point? I hope it's not confusing, guys. If there is any confusion, please stop me and clarify it. All clear? Guys, hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, so
Yes, sir.
what happened after that was we opened all this and done it. I sold the business off. One of the partners bought it and then I moved on. Then I joined a corporate company which was looking to start afresh, which means that they were into different areas of businesses. The company was called Alchemist. So they were into personal aircraft charter. They were into manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, hospitals, flowers, a lot of things, but not into the hospitality and the restaurant business. So I was given charge to set up two different verticals. One was hotels and the other one was restaurants. Now, the biggest challenge was, my mandate from the chairman was we only want FDRs, not even CDRs, only FDRs. And I want grand places. So we had to look for large formats and we had to create something which was better than what was currently there in the market. So a lot of research started going in. One of the places that we set up was called Spice Water Trail, which was one of the first South Indian non-vegetarian places, which was into the fine dining category outside of hotels. So for this, we spent almost 3 months traveling across the southern part of India, going to villages, actually staying in people's houses, for 8 hours, 9 hours, eating the kind of food that they had. And we actually got cooks from that area. We just had one chef in that entire restaurant because we needed somebody from an administrative perspective, purchasing, and to standardize our recipes. But rest, everybody was like a home cook. Why? Because we didn't want the food to have a commercial taste. We wanted to be as authentic as possible. So we started doing the food trials and everything. And then we realized that some of the food was way too spicy for the market, which we think that we can eat a lot of spice in the north. But trust me, that food was really spicy. Certain areas are really, really, they make the food really hot and spicy. So we had to tone it down. So the learning that I got from there was that A, you don't need a whole battery of chefs to run a kitchen. You need 2 or 3 chefs who are very strong administratively, presentation-wise, and keeping your costs under control. Rest, you need a lot of guys who can cook and who've been doing this for years and generations. So, and the other factor was it also brought our costs down. Now you would ask me why. Okay, a home cook or a cook who has been doing it in a different place versus a fully trained chef, the salaries are very different. And I'm talking about even at commie levels. So for example, if we were paying a commie 12,000 at that particular point of time, the home cook, we would put 8,000. And then we had, put them up in an apartment, which was almost $1,000 a head. So still we were saving almost 3,000 per head. So this was the other learning, that how do you think out of the box and understand where can I source my people? What is it that I need to get into it? Labor costs at that particular point of time was still not that expensive. Now the labor costs are going up because your minimum wage rate level is being determined by the government, and which is significantly higher. The NCR has the highest wage rate in the entire country, followed by Mumbai and then rest of Maharashtra. So you need to be very mindful of that. Start doing time and motion study, which we started doing at this particular restaurant, that how much time does it take, what are the steps, and how many people are actually required. Because it's very easy to, fill the restaurant with a lot of staff. Achha, ye kar lega, wo kar lega, ye kar lega. Because see, you're not occupied all the time. Correct? All your seats are not occupied all the time. All your burners are not burning at that particular point of time. So there has to be something called, anybody? A particular term I'm sure you guys would have learned. Multitasking. You have to have people who can multitask. You have to train them. Training, again, is a very important aspect which is often neglected. Now, training, why training? Because you can't be there everywhere, but you need people who can represent you in your own business. So you train them. Train them how to greet, how to meet, how to respect your clients, how to solve situations in a particular place. If they can't, how to, get back to your guest, maybe allowing them to have a word with you. So this becomes, again, a very, very important aspect. Then comes the aspect of designing. With this particular restaurant, though the company had a lot of money, we were given a particular budget. And at that particular point of time, to do this kind of a restaurant, I mean, in today's date, would have cost you nothing less than 4.5, 5 crores. And I was given a budget of 1.5 crores to do everything, which meant setting up the entire place, including paying the architects, the consultant, the contractor, to do up everything. I mean, a blank space, and this included the security money for the rent, and the deposit was 6 months. So we negotiated hard on the rent. Decor. What you need to understand something about a restaurant, especially a real estate that you don't own. Everything, once you decide to move, is pretty much sold at scrap. You don't get any money out of it. Unless and until you're selling a running business or somebody is taking a running business from you. If you're closing shop and moving, there is no salvage value, pretty much. Except for your brand name, there's nothing else to salvage. So your input cost, you have to be very, very mindful of. What is the kind of equipment I want to use? A, you need to use good quality equipment, which is especially your kitchen equipment, because that has to be studied. You can't have stuff breaking down every day, correct? You can't have stuff which you need to repair, replace, and keep maintaining on a daily basis. Secondly, you have to be very, very smart with your interiors. What people don't realize is the value of windows, natural light, and arches, because these give you a lot of sense of space, visibility, direction. People go plaster the wall, put so much ornate stuff everywhere, which typically has no value later on. So you need to be very smart with your interiors. Correct?
Kush, there are a couple of questions in the comment section.
Please.
And I'll throw them at you. So one is from Mr. Varun Jaggi. So he is asking, is it fair to say that the formal sector or the formal restaurant space, is it drawing inspiration from the standalones? And there's a run-up question from Ms. Muskan Dogal. She's asking that with respect to the earlier question that I just stated, why the consumers out there are more comfortable with the informal chains than the formal chains. I think she's talking mostly about more mom and pop run shops or smaller chains which are not like big brands. Why is there a comfort zone there? So these are couple of
I will answer both the questions. First of all, yes, a lot of formal restaurants now are drawing inspiration from casual dining spaces, specifically which are individually run, which as you term as mom and pop. The reason is because a lot of corporates, when you start corporatizing, somewhere I feel you start losing the personal touch. So it is very, very important. I'll give you some examples. There is a restaurant in Bombay called Solace. It's a lifestyle restaurant, 100% vegan, and it's all about health and the whole thing. A corporate company can't pretty much run that kind of a place in multifarious ways. Why? Because people are buying into a particular lifestyle. So it becomes extremely important to understand that maybe the owner or the chef is a critical aspect who people come and talk to and meet. I will give you a certain example from my personal business. When we opened Shalom was such a huge success that we wanted to replicate it everywhere. And a lot of facts are not known about it. We opened one Shalom in Vasant Vihar and we opened 2 Shaloms in Goa. All 3 failed miserably. And the reason was because none of us was there. The reason for Shalom's success was that we were there. We used to man the gate. We used to be interacting with pretty much every guest. So the guests used to not only come to have a good time, but also to mingle with us. I'm not saying that we were celebrities or anything, but it was just the way we would handle people there, allow them in, talk to them, take the orders, all of that. So here, what I'm trying to tell you is your personality rubs off into the place. You become the restaurant. Get my point? That is why a lot of individual standalone places, and there are phenomenal examples in Delhi. If you guys want to go and see one of the places, as and when this lockdown lifts up and we are slightly more brave, there is a place in Chhatarpur called the Quick Brown Fox, run by this, for me, he's young because he's just about 30, chef, owner, a cafe, an all-day cafe, beautiful. There are a couple of Bihari restaurants over here in Shahpur Jat and all, run by this lady. Again, very, very nicely done. Now, the important thing is, their passion comes through. They are there all the time. There's another very good example of a friend of mine who owns a chain now, about 3 restaurants called Carnatic Cafe, Pavan. He doesn't have a formal education in hospitality, but he was driven by passion. He spent a lot of time with me and, revising the places. Okay, I'm going to come to the McDonald's thing later. Let me just finish the Carnatic Cafe example. So he also got cooks from back home in Bangalore. They used to cook in temples. So the whole environment and the food that is served in this place is extremely, extremely different. If you ever get a chance to try Carnatic Cafe, you should. There is one at one Horizon Center near the Google building, and the other one is in GK. Phenomenal food. So personal touch, personality become a very, very important part. And anybody who wishes to get into this business, this is what I would, advise you. Your personal touch, you being there, you leading the thing from the front is very important. You have to have that sense. And in order to do that, there are 3 or 4 things which are extremely important and which you should know. And if you know that you can't do it, then you need to get somebody who can do it for you. A, you have to be extremely humble. B, you have to be the hardest working. You have to be the first one in and the last one out. 3, never ever let people tell you what you need to do. In the sense, it's your business, take advice, but always do your homework. Always. Extremely important. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Sandeep, there is an issue on my end. I can't see all the questions on the side, so I'll be grateful if you could, just keep shooting the questions at me.
Sir, I'll do that. So if you're done with the question, I can throw the other question.
No, I just want to know if this brings some amount of clarity, the difference between independent, which means I'm not talking about chain formats, individual restaurants versus corporate restaurants.
Yeah, it does, Kush. So I think that got answered pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, for the guys who spoke about, see, at some point when you expand, you have to, Kush mentioned that when you went to Goa, of course you can't be in Goa. So, that's where that personal expression limitation comes through. So it's a give and take.
It's a give and take. Sandeep, the only thing I would like to add to this is sometimes we are driven by our own personal greed and misplaced sense of ambition. So I would recommend and say that if you want to dominate a market, take a city, saturate it before you can move on.
Yeah, and I think there's a good example of this restaurant. You would possibly know them also, Greener. So they are trying to do vegan food. Yeah, they've just got 3 outlets. They're not in a rush. Now they're trying to go to Goa, and it's interesting, because you want to expand. And so where is that line between trying to understand when is that right time for you to, and at what pace you do that, I guess.
And Sandeep, just on this, what I would like to add, which is quite relevant to today's time, is when we expand a lot, and a lot of people don't realize this, is people have started over leveraging the restaurant business. And that is one of the reasons why this business in today's scenario is suffering so much, because the businesses are so overexposed and over leveraged in terms of taking capital that you're not being able to service your debts. In my opinion, it is really important to understand that if I'm running, let's say, one outlet, it's not big or small. You can make tons of money from one outlet, because imagine spending 8 years in one restaurant to take it to a certain level. Fujia, I will give you a great example. Fujia is one of the oldest restaurants in Delhi. I'm sure Mr. Munjal also will vouch for it. They opened only one restaurant. They have a phenomenal lifestyle ahead of them. What they did was they managed to have staff which stayed with them for a long time. They managed to work on their costs. They managed to negotiate on rents better. So what I'm trying to say is stay focused. As your first venture, stay focused on one area. Expand it, beat the hell out of it. Try and experiment everything within that. See how you can reduce your cogs. See how you can work around your manpower. See how you can, make your own team grow. Everybody loves growth. So when you partner up with your own staff, they will take you places. The moment you create one move, create something else, move, it kind of, puts you into a different zone. I'm not saying it can't be doable. It depends on, where you want to reach. But going forward, post the COVID situation also, it will be a big game changer.
Absolutely. And I think not all food concepts are scalable, so it has to be looked at it from that point of view. Not everything is scalable, so you have to think that through. Anjana, next question, if you could just throw that.
Sure, sir. Okay, so the next question is from Kumar Abhik. He's talking about the McDonald's. Okay, so what he's saying is that we have seen multiple disputes between stakeholders and the ownership of McDonald's, which led to the downfall in the quality of the food. So what we need to do, what could be done to avoid consistency of the food dispute of the change in ownership?
See, this was, McDonald's was divided into two in India. So the rights of it was divided into different regions, and two regions were given to one person and two regions were given to somebody else. Now, what happens in a situation like this is sometimes egos get into the way, and that is what happened with Mr. Bakshi. He said, I've got McDonald's into India, but what he didn't realize was that he doesn't own McDonald's. He is representing McDonald's. McDonald's is an international brand. Yes, he had a big part in Indianizing the McDonald's. No doubt about it. But he was still a franchisee at the end of the day. That is why McDonald's took it over, and for a long time, there was a big drop in the quality and the consistency. Is that clear?
Yes, I
if
think.
There is any,
yes,
any doubt, please ask. Please ask.
That's what I was asking about. So the consistency, because of the dispute, the consistency of the food declined very badly.
So this, what I was mentioning to earlier, this stems out of ego, corporate greed, and control. Thirst for control. So always remember this when you want to expand. And this is again the point which COVID has brought all of us into is we are seeing this everywhere, where businesses are so over leveraged. You've taken money for rampant growth, expansion, and you're not being able to service debt. I mean, imagine, we've been in the lockdown for almost 3 months, and
Yes.
businesses are shutting. Why? Because we don't have money to pay rent, salaries, and all. Come on. Which means that we have deployed all our capital. We borrowed money and we spent it into things where we are not seeing anything. So my recommendation as an entrepreneur is, never over leverage yourself, which means have the ability to pay back your debts, have working capital of at least 3 months in advance with you. One of the reasons for success of Mahima was we always worked 3 months ahead of our time. We didn't know, this is going to happen. I mean, this is still a while ago, but that is a fundamental which we learned the hard way. But going forward, this should be something which is there in your mind. A lot of businesses, especially in the restaurant spaces, you will see they die because of lack of money or getting overexposed. COVID has exposed that even more.
There's a very interesting question, Coach. You would love this one. There's a young man, Mr. Abhay Prashar. He wants to know, he wants to go on an entrepreneurship journey, but wants to ask, should he work in a hotel for a while? So I guess you are the right person for this answer.
Or should just leave everything.
Should I follow my passion right away?
You know what? It's a very, very interesting question. If it was any other time, I would have said join a hotel first. But given the current situation and the scenario, don't take me otherwise, but every disaster comes with a huge opportunity. And for each one of you, I think this is one of the biggest opportunities. And I'm happy to share two of my own experiences, which I've started. The reason why I got a couple of minutes late joining in was just this morning, I have dispatched 25 platters, a new business that I've started from home, which is called Love for Grazing. So these are basically platters that I've not promoted it anywhere, as in no social media, nothing. This is just purely word of mouth. And today is the first day of the order. So 25 boxes, each box is pegged at $600. These are platters which come with cheese, with fruits, with cold cuts and all of that. So you just open the box and you can, just display it or put it out. The second venture is just beaded cakes, which I've encouraged my wife to start doing it. And she's been doing it for about a month now. And today, by God's grace, she's getting almost 8 to 10 orders per day. The reason why I'm saying this is, A, we are all going to eat. We have to eat. Everybody can cook, but everybody does not like their cooking or finds it too tedious, correct? Or too messy. So our consumer behavior is also going to change. I'll just give you some statistics. Just bear with me for 2 minutes. China has pretty much opened up completely. And today the situation in China is the hotels are still below 40% occupancy. Restaurants, despite opening up the entire thing, have seen almost a 60% drop currently also. So at a 60% drop, the businesses, you are still in negative. Similarly, in the Scandinavian countries, Sweden didn't go in for a lockdown, Denmark did. But the restaurant business has seen a drop, which means that physically people are not moving out. But at home, people are wanting to, see a change. Nobody wants to eat their dal roti every day. You want a little change. You want a little variety. People are still going to start entertaining. I think post 8 June, all of us will start meeting, at least in our homes. Not big groups, but smaller groups. This will pave a way for a new wave of entrepreneurs. And this is what you need to look at. Identify the opportunity. Specialize into a particular segment. Don't try and be everything to everybody. Say that I want to be in the bracket of, let's say, 2,000 rupees a head kind of thing. I'm just, throwing it out there. So what is it that I need to do? Maybe what I can do is I can do a whole creation of dips and chips from my house, or I can do the most phenomenal variety of breads, or I can do the greatest chocolates in the world. So, these are the kind of businesses that are really going to stem out. In India, the average dining out, and this is the national average I'm giving you, the national dining out average is 4 times a month. 4 times a month. National average. It's not individual, but the national average. The Chinese average of dining out. Any guesses? Anybody? Any guesses? How many times they dine out in a month? The Chinese average.
15.
20, sir.
Close. One more guess?
20.
It's about 24 times. So that's massive. Singapore is slightly higher. They eat out almost pretty much every day. So what I'm talking about is the huge gap. And this gap is where you guys come in. Your young minds, how you're going to capitalize on this. This is going to be a big game changer for each one of you. And anybody who has a passion of getting into the business, think about where you can cater this. Dial a Chef is going to become a very big business. You understand the concept of Dial a Chef? Anybody? Okay, Dial a Chef is that, you're rated and somebody wants a chef to come. This is not your typical caterer coming to your house. It can be Dial a Chef for a single person, or it can be for up to, let's say, 20, 30 people, where a chef comes in, he creates a whole menu for you, he gets the ingredients for you, and he charges you. And he creates a full spread for you. He's not there to serve you or anything, but he will create, he will set it up, he will present it, and dish it out for you. So this again is going to be a massive business opportunity. Cakes, chocolates, different kinds of foods, platters, this is all going to start exploding. So think about it, work on it. I'm sure Mr. Munjal and his team will also be, throwing some insight about these kind of businesses. So conventional business will be there.
The only comment, I have, and I think we have another couple of people asking Kushu the same thing in terms of, looking at an entrepreneurial journey in terms of what they want to do. And I'll throw them at you. But, remember this COVID situation might be short term, So what, if you hear Mr. Nagrath, what he's saying is that the two fundamentals are human beings will consume. Not
Absolutely.
everyone is going to eat home or cook home. But if you can get food to them, so there's always a way out. So, the consumption is going to take place. It's just a question where that consumption is happening. Who knows, 6 months down the line, the virus is gone and we are back to where we are and the industry is thriving again in a different way. The point is it can thrive even now, is the point that he's making.
Very important thing what Mr. Manjala said, because what I'm trying to say is the patterns might change. The way we consume is going to change. Our habits are going to change, but nobody's going to stop eating. I mean, I'll give you a very small example. When the lockdown started, how many people went out and bought new clothes, shaving gel, phones, cars, or anything? Everybody rushed to buy food. Food was the first thing. Let me stock up on food, milk, this, that. Correct? That is our natural instinct. So we are going to eat. We are still going to socialize. The way we socialize might change. Your consumption is not going to change. It's only going to go up. Even if you look at it, the consumption in the past 3 months of food has overshot in a big way than what it was on the average times. So
just a comment for folks, you're asking a similar question vis-a-vis the entrepreneurship, direction. What you could do is maybe you can, later on find time with Mr. Nagrath one-on-one. He can tell you much more if you do it one-on-one.
I would actually, if you could share my email ID with them, I will reply to each one individually.
So, that will, Varun, you and Ankur, I'm seeing you are also showing that inclination. So what we'll do is we'll connect you with Mr. Nagrath, reach out to him, maybe set up a one-on-one conversation. He'll guide you. Because, of course, this will not happen over a minute or two's conversation. But I think broadly what he is telling you is a response that the opportunity really is always going to be there.
No, it is massive opportunity because, see, the easiest thing to say is, oh, yaar, dunya khatam ho gayi. Nahi hoga, yaar. Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen. We are going to still party. We are still going to... Man is a social animal. We need to do that. How we do it might change. In the information age, is this still a certain crucial lesson? There's a very important question which I see now from a gentleman called Varun Jaggi. He's saying that we are in the information age. Is there still a certain crucial lesson on the ground, particularly a crucial one? How do we plan, sir? Okay, Varun, if you could, just elaborate a little more on your question, I will answer that. It's an interesting thing that you are touching upon, but I want to understand what specifically you want to know on this.
Hello, sir. Varun
Yeah.
Desai. So, my question is basically that we have a lot to read and we have a lot to research on the web, and we can go about planning whatever we want to start in terms of standalone restaurant or maybe for that matter anything related to food and beverage service. But I just want to know that there are certain lessons that you learn when you step your feet on the ground, like when you go into the operations. So is there any crucial lesson, particularly the most important one that we miss out on, that, like you said, the COG, calculating the COG as the labor cost, a similar aspect that you could highlight apart from those three that you mentioned earlier?
Correct. Work out a budget. Most importantly, know how much money you have, where you can, raise it from, and always make sure, especially when you're starting out, that you pretty much have 1 year's cash flow in your hand. Very, very important. Varun, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
the cash flow bit is extremely important because, you know, we all think that, you know, the day we open, we are going to be packed and the money is going to start coming in from day one. Sometimes it does happen, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. So you need to have enough money to sustain your business at least for 1 year. So when you're budgeting, account for that cash flow, 1 year's cash flow in your business plan. Very, very important, because a lot of times people forget this thing. I mean, it's not that trivial, and people say, "Acha, ho jayega." Nahin. Just make sure and do not touch that cash. Use it only for your monthly business running. Do not use it for anything else.
And, you know, just to add to what mentioned Varun, now you will know why we need to understand financial statements, right?
No, I agree. You know, Mr. Munjal will vouch for it. I used to run away from accounts, not realizing how much of it I have to use it now. The Excel sheets, the more I ran away from it, the more I'm using it. It is very important. You don't have to be an accountant, but you need to know how to read your financial statements, how to do your recipe costings, how to understand to make a P&L statement, what your balance sheet says. It is important, because you need to know whether you're making money or not at the end of the day and how much of it is. The other thing which, Varun, I would like to point out is always remember that when you say I'm earning 5 lakhs in sales, it's not the entire money. You need to apportion for expenses, you need to apportion for taxes, all of these things. So when you say my turnover is 5 lakhs, yes, make sure how much you're netting and how much will you get out of it.
Yes.
Most welcome.
Kush, I think we are at that 1 hour mark. So I guess if there are any more questions, we'll pass them on to you, just to be, you know, careful with your time.
I would just like to answer one question. There's somebody who had asked, Abhay Parashar, about can we plan for a cafe or a restaurant while working in a hotel, or we should just leave everything and focus on our plans. See, I will always advise you that it is good, even if you work for somebody for a year. It teaches you certain values and certain discipline and understanding of a broader perspective of how a business is run. What are the important departments that are into it? What goes into accounting, what goes into purchasing, what goes into sourcing, what goes into facilities management. It is a good idea, but go with the intention that I want to set up my own thing. And if you have that inkling, your learning in a hotel or a restaurant company will be very different from just merely working in that place. So if you have that intention that I want to learn, I want to set up my own thing, but I'm joining this hotel for a year to understand how the departments work, volunteer and go and learn and be a part of different departments, it will really open up your eyes.
Another interesting one.
Let me just hold on. So during my recent Muskan Duggal, right?
Cloud Kitchen.
Okay, so Muskan, this is exactly what I was talking about. What I have set up personally at home is a kind of a cloud kitchen only. And yes, they are far more profitable to a dine-in, because your overheads, your rentals, your staff costs, your overall physical setup is very different. So I would recommend that, going forward, this is going to grow even more. Home deliveries, home catering, this is going to explode onto the scene. So you're on the right direction. Think about it. Keep working on it. And the margins, like I was mentioning, of CDRs and FTRs is in the range of 5 to 15. In cloud kitchens, it can be as high as between 20 to almost 30%. And if you do it really well, you can even touch about 35%. Muskan, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Abhay, you asked a question, can traditional theme cafes or restaurants get a good review in a place like Delhi? Of course they can. If you do them well and you do good food, it'll do very well. The other thing, guys, which I want to, just quickly touch upon is don't go in for elaborate menus. It's passé. It doesn't work. You might have 10 or 15 things on your menu, but make them the best. People should come to that place just to eat that dish. Just make sure that this always stays in your mind. I need to specialize in 3 or 4 dishes, which are my signature, and people need to drive in order, or, order it from me. Anything else, guys?
I think what we'll do, Kush, is if we have any more questions, queries, we'll connect folks with you, because I think there is going to be more interest in queries.
Sandeep, I'm sorry. I just saw a pop-up from a gentleman called Shailinder Singh Negi. What all aspects should I look after in opening a restaurant and bar in today's scenario? What I would just quickly touch upon is keep speaking to a lot of property owners. You might get a deal at a location at a cheaper rental. If you do that, lock it in and take a 6 or a 7 month overview before you start the commitment to build the place. Of course, you can do that. Sorry, Sandeep, back to you.
Yeah, I think and we have another question. I think kind of answered that through the talk. This is coming from Harsh. What he's asking is, would you suggest a person starting a club or a fancy restaurant? What does it take to make it a success? I think we've kind of through the talk answered at various levels in terms of key pieces which go into making it successful or otherwise. Harsh, do you have any specific question, or do you think that the general information has been able to answer that?
Sandeep, I'll just add one point to this. Harsh, especially for a club or a fancy restaurant, your personal PR and you managing the floor, apart from the whole setup, rental, staff, everything else, is extremely important. Very, very important. And the kind of staff that you hire and their level of interaction, their personality will play a big role. Because clubs and fancy restaurants have a different trajectory and a different personality than other places. So your level of engagement, your level of, and when I say knowledge, I mean that you have to be generally aware of what is happening in the world so you can strike in many more conversations with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. So you yourself play a very, very important aspect in this whole space.
Folks, we are at an hour and 10 minutes. If you really need to have him back, we will do that. I'll check with Mr. Nagrath when he has some time for us again. We'll connect you through email. But I think I'll just ask him to give some closing remarks for at least today. Does that sound okay, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think you can sleep over, the things that he has spoken about, and we can definitely have him back, because it doesn't look like it's going to end like this, because there are obviously going to be more thoughts and questions. Kush, if you can just recap or, close.
Okay, guys. You know what? Like I said, every disaster is an opportunity. The biggest business booms came after the Second World War. Every century brings in its own set of disasters and innovations. This is the time to innovate. And my personal opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, as they used to call the garage entrepreneurs in the US, whenever you guys have time, speak to Mr. Munjal. He will explain a lot on that. But the entrepreneurial journeys in India are going to be far more now. Small businesses is what I see the future as, especially if you can, just create that small little niche for yourself. Specialize, and get after it. You go day in, day out. The only way you'll succeed is if you live, breathe, and think about it and work. Most important thing is keep making your business plans on a daily basis. Keep going back to your dean, keep going back to your professors, refine it and go after it. This is the time, guys. I mean, you guys are living in, it is sad, but it's not going to last, this whole tragedy. So you need to be ahead of the curve. And this is the opportunity to do it. And be ready to work hard. Be ready to work hard. There is no alternative to working hard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kush. And I think everyone, I really wanted him to come and speak to you. I personally don't know of anyone, who has had the kind of journey that he has had, and it speaks for itself. But really, so it's been informative as much for all of you as for me. So I also learned something through the hour that he has spent. So thank you very much, Kush, and I'm sure.
No, pleasure. Pleasure.
Really love to have you back once again after a break. Really appreciate the time that you've given.
No, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And Sandeep, please do share my personal email ID with the students. I would love to be in touch with them. Any questions they have at any particular point of time, they can ask. And rest assured, I will answer each one of you. It might not be immediate, but I will revert back to each one of you. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, and for all the students on the call, remember one thing, and at least I've held on to that all my life and continue to do so for the remaining part. There is always, an opportunity for somebody who thinks and has an attitude that is looking for that. So, always be that person, right? So,
Absolutely.
Even in a lockdown, and as I was hearing Mr. Nagrath, he still couldn't stop being an entrepreneur, right? So for a guy who's leading, God knows how many restaurants in Saudi Arabia, because he's not there, that doesn't mean he'll stop thinking of doing something. And here he goes on, and starts, throwing certain ideas out, and it's still at it. So this is what, it is all about. So thanks, Kush, amazing.
No, but Sandeep, the only thing I will say is, make sure you guys have that Kida in you. You have to have the Kida. That is the only thing that will drive you. Develop that Kida and go after it. That's all.
Anjana, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think if you look at the chat boxes, everybody is very happy to attend your session. And I'm pretty sure they are looking forward to the another one. And so we will get back to you very soon, probably, and we will share your email ID as well. Thank you so much, sir.
I'm just typing my email ID for everyone.
Okay, great. So all the students, please, he's typing the email ID.
And Kush, I may have mentioned or may not, so we have recorded this session, so this will go on YouTube as well, so that others and a broader community can benefit. Hope that's okay with you.
No, it's absolutely all right, Sandeep. Always a pleasure.